Jack sat alone at his kitchen table, the morning sunlight creeping through the blinds and casting narrow stripes across his worn coffee cup. The steam rose but did nothing to warm the emptiness he felt inside. At 67, he had become almost invisible, a man whose life had quietly faded into the background while everyone else moved forward. His body ached in ways that no doctor seemed to care about, his mind churned with regrets that had piled up over decades, and his spirit carried the weight of 100 missed chances. He stared at the cold coffee and thought, is this it? Is this all there is? The silence of the house pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. It was then, scrolling mindlessly through his phone, that a short clip caught his eye. Elon Musk, calm and precise, explaining how he starts each day. Your mornings define your life, Musk said. If you want to create something meaningful, you start by doing the one thing that matters before anything else. Jack frowned, skepticism tugging at him. Billionaires and morning routines felt like a world away from his creaking kitchen and dusty garage. Yet something in Musk's tone, the quiet insistence, lit a tiny spark. He replayed the clip, feeling the faint stirrings of curiosity, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to matter. He remembered the days when he used to tinker in his garage, building model airplanes and small rockets with his son. The memory was sharp, bittersweet, a reminder of a time when he felt alive and capable. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The video overlay encouraged, and Jack chuckled at the irony. That had once been him, the one pushing forward, inventing, creating, dreaming. Now, he wondered if that part of him was lost forever. He looked around the kitchen, noting the peeling wallpaper, the neglected plants on the windowsill, the stack of unopened bills. It was a landscape of surrender, a testament to years of quiet resignation. Yet Musk's words lingered, a pulse of possibility in the monotony. Jack felt the familiar tug of fear. What if he tried and failed? What if his body couldn't keep up? What if no one cared? But alongside the fear, there was a flicker of defiance. Maybe he owed it to himself to try, to reclaim even a fragment of the man he once was. He remembered his father's words from long ago, the first step is always the hardest, but it's the only one that matters. With a shaky hand, he set his cup down and opened the garage door, letting in the fresh morning air. Dust motes danced in the light, settling over old boxes, tools, and forgotten projects. He ran his fingers over the workbench, brushing away layers of disuse, and a small smile crept onto his face. He didn't know where to start, but he knew he had to start. Musk's routine was simple: prioritize the most important task first, dedicate time every morning to creating, refining, thinking. Jack thought about what mattered to him now, at this late stage in life. Not wealth, not fame, but a sense of purpose, the knowledge that he could still contribute something meaningful. He decided, almost instinctively, that his first task would be to dust off an old project he had abandoned decades ago, a miniature solar-powered car he and his son had once dreamed of building. The car sat under a tarp in the corner of the garage, faded and forgotten, but still intact. Jack felt a surge of determination, a current of energy that he hadn't felt in years. He moved the tarp aside, revealing the dusty frame and delicate wiring. His hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from anticipation. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. He set up a small work lamp, gathered his tools, and began examining the project with a meticulous eye, remembering Musk's words, do the thing that matters before anything else. Start now. Hours passed unnoticed as Jack worked, adjusting circuits, polishing tiny gears, testing motors. The morning light shifted to afternoon, but he barely noticed. He was in the flow, the old thrill of creation flooding back. At one point, he paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He realized how much he had missed this feeling, the simple satisfaction of building, solving problems, making progress. That evening, as he cleaned up the garage, he felt a tentative sense of accomplishment. The solar car wasn't finished, far from it, but it had moved forward. And with it, so had he. Jack looked around the garage, the once neglected space now alive with possibility, and thought about Musk's discipline, his relentless focus, the small daily actions that compounded into monumental achievement. If a man could revolutionize the world with his mornings, perhaps Jack could reclaim a corner of his own world, rebuild a sense of purpose, and maybe even reconnect with the people he had drifted away from. That night, Jack went to bed with a lighter heart, the spark of hope flickering steadily. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he had begun, and sometimes, beginning was everything. In the stillness of the night, he whispered to himself, maybe it's not too late. Maybe today is the start of something new. The idea of mornings as a sacred, transformative space had taken hold. Jack resolved that he would rise early, dedicate the first hour of each day to meaningful creation, and let the rest of the world catch up to him. Musk's voice echoed in his mind, a reminder that even the smallest actions, repeated consistently, could ripple into extraordinary outcomes. Jack felt a thrill he hadn't experienced in years, a mixture of fear, excitement, and determination. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, full of doubts, physical limits, and the skepticism of others, but he also knew he had the power to choose. As he drifted into sleep, Jack pictured the morning sun streaming through the blinds, the workbench bathed in golden light, and himself standing there, hands busy, heart alive, ready to reclaim the life he had thought was lost. Tomorrow, he decided, would be different. Tomorrow, he would rise with purpose, and for the first time in a long time, he would believe that age was not the limit, but a backdrop for the next chapter of his life. The journey had begun, quietly, in the stillness of a small kitchen and a cluttered garage, guided by a simple idea: start now, start small, and let the ripple grow. And in that moment, Jack realized that perhaps Elon Musk's morning routine wasn't just about productivity, it was about reclaiming agency, daring to matter again, and proving, first to himself and then to the world, that it is never too late to change. Jack's life before that spark of hope had been a quiet slide into invisibility, a slow fade marked by small, aching regrets and the weight of things left undone. At 67, he looked back at the years as though peering through a foggy window, trying to make sense of the blurry shapes that were his choices and losses. He had once been full of energy, a man whose curiosity and skill as an engineer had drawn admiration from colleagues and friends alike, but now the office he retired from had forgotten him, and even the neighborhood seemed to move on without noticing his absence. His marriage had ended 10 years earlier, a casualty of his obsession with work and his inability to prioritize emotional connection. He remembered the nights he stayed late in his garage, soldering circuits and sketching designs for inventions that would never leave the page, while his wife sat across from him silently, the gap between them widening with each passing hour. His children were grown and busy, their lives full of their own struggles and ambitions, and he had drifted into the role of the forgotten parent, the distant father whose calls went unanswered or returned with polite but hurried excuses. He spent long afternoons wandering his quiet suburban home, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet, the wallpaper faded, the air carrying a faint scent of dust and old coffee. On some days, he would sit on the porch and watch the neighbors tend their gardens, families laughing over barbecues, children chasing balls across lawns. He felt like an observer of life rather than a participant, and the loneliness clung to him like a second skin. The evenings were the worst. Jack would sit in the dim light of his living room, television murmuring in the background, old photographs spread across the coffee table. One photograph in particular haunted him, a snapshot of him and his son, grinning ear to ear as they launched a small model rocket in the backyard. The boy's hands were covered in paint, Jack's own smudged with graphite from hastily drawn plans, and the sky above them seemed impossibly wide, full of promise. That memory burned, a painful reminder of what had slipped away, of a self he had neglected, and of dreams abandoned. His professional accomplishments now felt hollow, trophies and certificates gathering dust on shelves, reminders of an identity that no longer fit the man in the mirror. Physical decline had crept in with quiet inevitability. A twinge in his knee reminded him that movement was no longer effortless, a morning stiffness in his shoulders told him that the years had been both harsh and relentless. Doctors offered practical advice: take it easy, don't overexert yourself, as if caution alone could replace purpose or the hunger to create. Jack had tried hobbies here and there, woodworking, painting, even a brief attempt at writing, but nothing had ignited the spark he once felt. The small victories felt transient, unsatisfying, and the gap between what he wanted to do and what he actually did widened each day. He had grown accustomed to this quiet surrender, this slow resignation, until the brief video of Elon Musk appeared on his screen and disrupted the pattern. The memory of the model rocket flashed through his mind again, bringing a pang of longing. The spark that Musk ignited, a suggestion that mornings could be reclaimed, that the first hour of the day could be devoted to creation and purpose, seemed almost absurd. Yet, amidst the cynicism, a stubborn part of him remembered the thrill of building something from nothing, the sense of possibility that had once defined his mornings and, by extension, his life. Jack realized he had been waiting for a signal, some external permission to matter again, and perhaps this was it. That night, he wandered into his garage, a space cluttered with memories and unfinished projects, a place that smelled of sawdust, oil, and time itself. He ran his hands across the surfaces, dusting off forgotten tools, brushing away the detritus of decades, and paused in front of a small wooden box. Inside were components from another life, tiny gears, motors, wires, half-built projects that had once thrilled him and his son. His fingers lingered over the pieces as if touching them could bridge the years, reconnect him to a younger, bolder self. He remembered the sound of the soldering iron, the satisfaction of a motor whirring to life, and the way his son's laughter had filled the space with warmth. In that moment, Jack felt a pang of grief and a surge of longing, an acknowledgement of everything he had lost and the knowledge that some of it could perhaps be reclaimed. He began pulling the materials together, cleaning a small section of the bench, organizing screws, motors, and miniature solar panels. He didn't yet know what he would create, only that he had to do something, and the act of starting seemed to matter more than the outcome. As the hours passed, the garage transformed in his mind from a storage of forgotten ambitions into a laboratory of possibility. Each tool, each piece of wire, each half-finished motor represented not failure but potential, a tangible reminder that creativity and purpose did not have to end with age. Jack allowed himself to dream again, cautiously at first, imagining the solar car he and his son had once planned. He pictured its sleek lines, the tiny motor that could harness sunlight, and the sense of achievement when it finally moved under its own power. The idea seemed audacious, perhaps even foolish, but a long-dormant thrill pulsed through him, mingling with fear and anticipation. The fear was there, undeniable. The fear of failure, of ridicule, of realizing that his body and mind were no longer capable. But it was tempered by something he hadn't felt in years: determination. He remembered Musk's words about doing the thing that matters before anything else, about starting now, and he resolved to reclaim mornings as a sacred space for creation. Jack knew he could not change the past, could not undo the years of missed connections or abandoned dreams, but he could take control of the hours he had left. The next morning, he woke before dawn, the house still dark except for the faint light creeping through the blinds. He moved quietly, almost ceremoniously, toward the garage, carrying a cup of strong coffee that steamed against the cool morning air. He flipped on the lamp above the workbench and surveyed the project area, the dust now seeming less oppressive, the tools more inviting. He began methodically, reconnecting wires, testing motors, examining old notes, recalling techniques he had long forgotten. Time slipped away, measured not in hours but in the engagement of mind and heart. As the sun rose, a soft golden light filled the garage, illuminating the project in progress. Jack paused to look at the tiny solar panel, the motor, the gears carefully aligned, and felt a swell of pride he hadn't experienced in decades. It was imperfect, incomplete, but alive with possibility. He thought about his children, about the photograph of him and his son launching that model rocket, and realized that what he was doing now, dedicating these early hours to creation, to movement, to reclaiming a sense of self, was not just for him but for them too. He could show them that life does not end at 67, that purpose can be reclaimed, that mornings could be sacred, intentional, transformative. The decision to rise early, to dedicate the first hour to meaningful action, became a ritual, a daily act of rebellion against resignation and invisibility. Each morning brought new insights, new experiments, small successes that compounded into growing confidence. Jack felt the slow return of agency, the sense that he could still matter, still create, still connect. As days turned into weeks, the solar car began to take shape. Jack refined circuits, aligned gears, polished surfaces, tested motors under the soft morning light. Each step was a small victory, each problem solved a reminder that creativity and purpose were not bound by age. The garage became a sanctuary, a theater of possibility where past failures faded and new achievements emerged. Jack's physical stamina improved subtly, the ritual of movement, bending, lifting, and fine manipulation restoring some of the vitality he feared lost forever. His mind, too, sharpened, engaging in problem-solving with a clarity and focus that surprised him. He reflected on Musk's example, not as a blueprint to imitate fully, but as a symbol of fearless persistence, of valuing action over hesitation, of letting curiosity and purpose dictate the day rather than the fear of inadequacy. Jack realized that the key was consistency, the daily commitment to meaningful work, no matter how small, no matter how uncertain the outcome. In those quiet hours before the rest of the world stirred, he was reclaiming himself, building not only a solar car but a new identity grounded in agency, curiosity, and courage. Letters he had left unsent, phone calls he had avoided, dreams he had abandoned, all these felt more within reach because he had begun again. The act of showing up every morning, of dedicating an hour to meaningful creation, was transforming the very way he saw himself. Jack no longer felt like a relic of a life past, he felt like a man who was alive, capable, and ready to embrace whatever remained of his journey. That reflection brought with it an unexpected warmth, the realization that purpose is not a destination but a daily practice, and that even small actions, repeated faithfully, could ripple outward in ways that mattered deeply. By the end of the third week, Jack looked at the partially completed solar car with something close to reverence. He ran his hands over the frame, smiled at the tiny adjustments he had made, and whispered to himself, "I am not finished. I am still here. I still matter." And in that moment, the quiet of the garage was filled with a profound sense of possibility, a recognition that age is not a limit but a backdrop for reinvention, and that even at 67, life could still surprise, challenge, and inspire. Jack woke that morning with the familiar ache in his knees and shoulders, a reminder that his body was no longer as forgiving as it had once been, yet there was a new energy beneath the pain, a subtle hum of purpose that made each step toward the garage feel lighter than the last. The house was still cloaked in darkness, the only sounds the distant hum of early traffic and the faint chirping of birds beginning their day. He brewed a strong coffee, savoring the aroma, and carried it with deliberate care to the workbench, where tools, wires, and miniature motors awaited like old friends. The solar car sat partially assembled, the gears aligned, circuits loosely connected, waiting for the next act of creation. Jack ran his fingers over the surface, noting the dust that had settled in corners, and smiled quietly to himself. "This is my time," he whispered. He had begun to realize that the mornings were not merely hours of productivity, they were a ritual of reclamation, a deliberate push against the tide of invisibility that had long threatened to drown him. Yet as the sun slowly painted the garage with streaks of gold, doubt crept in, uninvited and persistent. "What if I can't finish it?" he muttered under his breath, the fear of failure whispering that his hands were too stiff, his mind too slow, that the years had taken more from him than he realized. He remembered Elon Musk's words, crisp and unflinching, "Do the thing that matters before anything else. Start now. Start before you feel ready." That phrase echoed, a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters. Jack squared his shoulders and began soldering a delicate connection, his hands trembling slightly but steady enough to reconnect the tiny motor to the solar panel. Sparks flew, and for a moment his heart leapt in anticipation. The motor spun, stuttering, then caught rhythm, a small miracle of motion that sent a rush of elation through him. It was imperfect, jerky, but alive, and in that motion, Jack felt a surge of validation. He leaned back and let the feeling wash over him, remembering the boyish joy of decades ago, building model rockets and tinkering with gadgets, feeling the thrill of possibility. His mind wandered briefly to his children, grown and distant, and he imagined showing them that he was still capable, that the fire of creation had never fully died. Yet reality returned, stark and pressing. He had lived too long in inertia, the world had moved on without him. Neighbors passed by, polite but indifferent, oblivious to the small victories happening behind closed garage doors. Jack felt the familiar tug of loneliness, a quiet ache beneath the excitement. He pressed on, adjusting gears, testing connections, sketching tiny modifications on scraps of paper. Every small step forward was a battle against inertia, against the fear that his age was a sentence rather than a canvas. Hours passed unnoticed as he worked, the morning sun climbing higher, and Jack found himself absorbed in the process, the doubt receding with each turn of a screw, each successful connection, each motor that hummed to life. By midday, he had achieved more than he had imagined possible in a single session, and yet the inner war was far from over. Questions lingered: am I doing this for myself, or to prove something to others? Will anyone care? Is this enough to matter? The doubts were relentless, but alongside them was a stubborn determination, a quiet insistence that he could reclaim agency over his life. That afternoon, Jack took a break and sat on the porch, letting the warm sun wash over his face. He thought about Elon Musk, the viral video, the words about mornings and purpose, and realized that Musk's genius was not just in invention, but in discipline, in daily commitment, in refusing to let fear dictate action. Jack imagined applying the same principle, not to rockets or electric cars, but to his own corner of the world, to projects that mattered to him and, perhaps, could inspire others. His mind drifted to the idea of sharing his journey, documenting the process of building the solar car, and the thought both excited and terrified him. Could he put himself out there at his age, expose vulnerability, invite judgment? He sipped his coffee, feeling the warmth anchor him, and decided that fear was not a reason to remain invisible. That evening, Jack's granddaughter, Emma, wandered into the garage, curious about the sounds of tinkering she had noticed through the open door. Her eyes widened at the sight of the partially built solar car, the motors, the wiring, the careful attention to detail. "Grandpa, this is amazing," she exclaimed, her voice carrying a genuine awe that warmed Jack's heart. For the first time in years, he felt seen not as an old man, but as a creator, a guide, a spark of possibility. Emma offered to help, her youthful energy and curiosity blending with his experience and knowledge. Together, they worked through the evening, connecting circuits, polishing gears, and testing the tiny motors. Jack felt a surge of joy and connection, a sense of purpose that went beyond the solitary satisfaction of creating. It was shared, multiplied, and profoundly human. As night fell, they cleaned up the workbench, and Jack reflected on the transformation that had begun in just a few short weeks. The mornings had become a lifeline, a deliberate reclamation of time, energy, and identity. The solar car was more than a project, it was a symbol of what was possible when discipline, curiosity, and courage intersected. Jack thought about the skepticism he would face, the doubts from friends, neighbors, even family, but the validation from this small, intimate collaboration with his granddaughter was enough to sustain him. He realized that the inner war, the battle between fear and hope, inertia and action, resignation and purpose, was not something to be won in a single day, but through consistent effort, through showing up, through choosing meaningful action over passivity. Each morning became a ritual, a sacred space for reclaiming life, and Jack began to notice subtle shifts. His body, though creaking, felt stronger, his mind, though clouded at times, felt sharper, his spirit, long dormant, flickered with a quiet but persistent light. He reflected on the years lost to fear, distraction, and self-doubt, and felt a mixture of regret and relief, regret for what had been neglected, relief that the capacity for transformation still existed. The solar car project advanced steadily, each component connected, each motor tested, each gear aligned. Jack documented the process with photos and notes, imagining that someday his children or grandchildren might see that the man they thought forgotten had not only persisted but thrived. He allowed himself to dream bigger, considering improvements, new ideas, and the possibility of sharing the journey online, perhaps inspiring others who felt trapped by age or circumstance. Yet even as excitement and hope grew, the inner doubts persisted. Was it enough to matter? Would his efforts resonate beyond the walls of the garage? He remembered Musk's insistence on action over hesitation and decided that validation was secondary, the act of creation itself was transformative. Each small success compounded, reinforcing the belief that mornings could be reclaimed, that purpose could be rediscovered, that age was not a cage but a backdrop for reinvention. Jack noticed subtle changes in his demeanor, in the way he carried himself, in the confidence that began to seep into interactions with neighbors, store clerks, and even his own family. He was quieter, more focused, yet exuded a sense of presence, a proof of engagement with life that had long been missing. As weeks turned into a month, the solar car neared completion. Jack and Emma had perfected the wiring, adjusted the solar panel for optimal sunlight absorption, and fine-tuned the motor for smooth operation. Each test run, though tiny and incremental, brought exhilaration, a tangible measure of effort and patience yielding results. Jack reflected on the journey, the mornings of disciplined work, the moments of doubt and fear, the small victories that built momentum, and realized that the inner war had shifted. The battle was no longer between fear and hope, but between action and complacency. Choosing action daily had transformed not just a project, but his identity, his perception of self, and his sense of purpose. One morning, after a successful test of the nearly finished solar car, Jack paused and looked at the small machine humming under the garage lamp. He felt a surge of pride, not just in the accomplishment, but in the discipline and courage that had brought him here. He thought of Musk again, not as a blueprint, but as a reminder of what relentless commitment could achieve, even when the odds seemed stacked against him. Jack realized that the mornings were now his anchor, the ritual that reclaimed agency, that restored dignity, that reignited passion. He felt a quiet but profound joy, a recognition that the years had not extinguished his capacity to create, to matter, to inspire. The inner war continued, of course, the doubts, the aches, the worries, but they had lost their dominion. Jack had learned that fear could coexist with action, that uncertainty could be countered with persistence, and that mornings, deliberately structured and purpose-filled, could serve as a launching pad for transformation at any age. As the sun rose higher, streaming golden light through the garage windows, Jack stood back and admired the solar car. It was not perfect, but it was alive, a testament to resilience, discipline, and the reclaiming of life's creative spark. He whispered to himself, "I am still here. I still matter. I still have time to build, to create, to connect." In that quiet moment, Jack understood the profound truth that had eluded him for decades: purpose is not measured in accolades, wealth, or recognition, but in consistent action, in the courage to start again, and in the willingness to rise every morning to do the thing that matters, no matter how small. The inner war had shifted from despair to hope, from hesitation to deliberate action, from invisibility to presence. And with that shift came a renewed sense of life, of agency, of possibility that would carry him forward into the next chapter of his days. Jack woke before dawn, as he had for the past several weeks, the house still steeped in silence except for the occasional creak of floorboards and the distant hum of early traffic. The mornings had become sacred, a refuge from the quiet despair that had once defined his days, and the garage awaited him like an old friend ready to share in the day's journey. He carried his coffee carefully, savoring the warmth and aroma, and set it on the workbench beside the partially completed solar car. Dust lay in corners, but now it seemed more like a veil hiding possibility than a mark of neglect. Jack ran his hands over the smooth metal of the tiny chassis, aligning the gears in his mind before touching them physically, recalling the principles he had read about Elon Musk's discipline and relentless commitment to action. "Start before you feel ready," Musk had said, and Jack repeated it aloud, letting the words settle in the quiet morning. The solar car was more than a project. It was a symbol, a vessel for reclaiming a life he had feared lost. Today, he resolved, he would take a small but bold step, testing the car under sunlight for the first time, observing how the motor responded to the panel and fine-tuning the connections accordingly. Fear whispered that it was too ambitious, that his hands were too stiff, that his mind was too slow to respond to unforeseen problems, but determination overrode hesitation. Jack positioned the car near the window where morning light streamed in, a golden shaft illuminating the project like a spotlight on a stage. He adjusted the wiring, checking each solder joint, examining connections under the lamp's bright glare. Every detail mattered, yet he reminded himself that perfection was not the goal, action was. With a deep breath, he connected the final wire, and the motor sputtered to life. It wasn't smooth, but it was moving, jerking slightly before gaining rhythm, and Jack felt a surge of triumph that sent warmth through his chest. It had been decades since he had felt such pure exhilaration. The movement of the tiny car was a small victory, yet it carried enormous weight. It was evidence that creation, no matter the scale, was still within his grasp, that mornings dedicated to purpose could yield results, that age was not a barrier but a backdrop for reinvention. As the car rolled along the makeshift track he had drawn on the garage floor, Jack's granddaughter, Emma, appeared at the doorway, rubbing her eyes and staring in awe. "Grandpa, it's alive," she whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and delight. Her presence was both grounding and inspiring. She reminded him that the act of creation was never solely about the self, but about connection, legacy, and shared wonder. Together, they spent hours testing the solar car, adjusting angles of the solar panel to catch optimal sunlight, fine-tuning the motor, and iterating on small changes that had outsized effects on performance. Emma's laughter filled the garage, mingling with the hum of the motor and the scratch of Jack's pencil against paper as he sketched adjustments and measured outcomes. The project had become a ritual, a collaboration that bridged generations, a tangible manifestation of the mornings reclaimed. Jack noticed subtle shifts in himself beyond the satisfaction of technical accomplishment. His hands, though still stiff at times, were steadier, guided by renewed confidence and a clarity of purpose. His mind, once dulled by routine and resignation, buzzed with ideas and possibilities, each morning adding layers of momentum. Even his posture improved, the deliberate movements of tinkering and lifting weights in the form of tools and materials strengthening his body in ways that traditional exercise had failed to do. Yet the inner war persisted in quieter, more nuanced forms. He found himself questioning motives. Was this project a desperate attempt to feel relevant, to impress his family, to chase the validation he had long denied himself? The doubt was persistent but manageable, tempered by the simple act of showing up each morning and committing to purposeful action. Jack reminded himself of Musk's insistence on doing the thing that mattered first, on action over hesitation, and realized that the act itself was transformative, independent of external judgment. As the days passed, the solar car progressed from a rudimentary framework to a functioning prototype. Each morning brought refinement, adjusting gears, balancing weight, calibrating solar efficiency. Jack documented the process meticulously, photographing steps, jotting notes, and recording observations. This documentation was not only practical but symbolic, a proof of persistence and evidence that his life's chapters were still being written. Emma continued to participate, her curiosity and energy infectious, and Jack found joy in teaching her, in passing along skills and insights that connected past, present, and future. The garage became a theater of possibility, the morning light casting long shadows that seemed to move in rhythm with their work. Jack realized he had fallen in love again, not with a person, but with the act of creation, with mornings, with disciplined, purposeful engagement. He felt a thrill in problem-solving, a subtle euphoria in seeing incremental progress, and a profound sense of agency that had been absent for decades. Yet outside the garage, life continued, indifferent and occasionally skeptical. Neighbors glanced curiously, some with polite nods, some with bemusement. His children remained cautious, viewing his renewed activity with the detached concern of those who have long accepted limitations. Jack accepted this, understanding that external validation was not required to sustain transformation. The morning ritual, the deliberate reclaiming of time and purpose, was its own reward. One morning, after several successful test runs, Jack paused and observed the tiny car gliding across the track. He realized that the movements, though small, represented something far greater, the embodiment of persistence, creativity, and resilience. He thought of Musk again, not as a model to mimic fully, but as a reminder of what disciplined action could achieve. The act of committing the first hour of the day to meaningful work was the catalyst, the seed from which momentum could grow. Jack felt the emotional shift deeply. The inner war had changed from hesitation versus action to anticipation versus refinement. Fear no longer dominated, curiosity and agency now guided him. He recognized that mornings were more than time slots, they were opportunities to reclaim identity, to assert presence, and to build something meaningful regardless of age. The small victories accumulated, compounding into confidence, purpose, and a renewed sense of self. Jack noticed how this discipline influenced other areas of life. Meals became more intentional, exercise more consistent, and social interactions more engaged. Even his sleep improved, as the satisfaction of meaningful morning work carried through the day. The solar car, once a neglected project, had become a symbol of transformation, a microcosm of what was possible when action and discipline intersected. One particularly golden morning, the car performed flawlessly, gliding smoothly under sunlight across the makeshift track. Jack and Emma exchanged triumphant smiles, laughter filling the garage as he marveled at the small machine. He realized that success was no longer measured by scale or external acknowledgement, but by the act of persistent engagement and the joy of creating. That afternoon, Jack reflected on the journey, recognizing how far he had come. The mornings had taught him the power of consistency, the importance of small steps, and the potential for reinvention regardless of age. He understood that purpose was cultivated daily, not discovered overnight, and that agency could be reclaimed at any stage of life. He also noted the unexpected rewards, rekindled connection with his granddaughter, the rekindling of skills long dormant, the emotional satisfaction of tangible progress. Jack allowed himself to dream bigger, considering possibilities for sharing his journey, documenting lessons learned, and even inspiring others who felt trapped by fear or resignation. The thought of posting videos online both excited and frightened him, but he recognized that action, not contemplation, would yield transformation. That evening, as the garage cooled and shadows lengthened, Jack cleaned the workbench, organized tools, and reflected quietly. The inner war had shifted from doubt to determination, from passivity to deliberate engagement. Mornings had become a crucible in which fear was tempered into action, hesitation into momentum, and invisibility into presence. Jack felt gratitude for the discipline he had cultivated, for the small victories that had multiplied into meaningful change, and for the realization that age was not a limit but a backdrop against which transformation could unfold. He whispered to himself, "I am here. I still matter. I can still create." The words carried weight, not bravado, but quiet affirmation. They signified a personal renaissance, a reclaiming of agency, and the dawning of a belief that the years behind him were not wasted, but preparatory, shaping the man who could now embrace mornings as instruments of purpose. Over the following weeks, Jack maintained the ritual. Each morning, he woke with intention, brewed his coffee, and stepped into the garage as if entering a sacred space. Progress on the solar car continued incrementally but surely, each adjustment, each test run, each refinement reinforcing confidence and identity. Emma remained a steadfast companion, her enthusiasm contagious, reminding him that creation could be both a solitary and shared endeavor. The garage became a stage for growth, where mornings were measured in moments of insight, movement, and triumph. Jack noticed subtle changes in his own demeanor. He walked taller, spoke with more conviction, and carried himself with renewed purpose. The act of reclaiming mornings had become a transformative ritual, shaping mind, body, and spirit. He realized that he had begun to define success not by external accolades, but by consistent action and the reclaiming of agency in the hours he controlled. One crisp morning, as sunlight spilled across the workbench and the solar car hummed smoothly across the track, Jack paused, hands resting on the edge, and allowed himself a long, satisfied breath. The vehicle's movements, though small and simple, symbolized the culmination of persistent effort, courage, and reclaimed possibility. He smiled at Emma, who mirrored his satisfaction, and recognized the profound lesson he had learned. Mornings, when deliberately reclaimed and infused with purpose, could transform life even in its later chapters. The inner war had not ended, but it had evolved into a battle between consistent engagement and distraction, between deliberate creation and wasted hours. Jack understood that he had won small victories, accumulated momentum, and discovered that transformation was less about grand gestures and more about the quiet, persistent assertion of agency day by day. That afternoon, Jack stepped back from the solar car and reflected on the journey. The mornings had provided structure, purpose, and a tangible manifestation of what was possible. He realized that action, rather than intention or regret, was the currency of transformation. Age had not dictated limits, consistency had created liberation. He whispered once more, "I am not done. I am still here. I still matter." And with that affirmation, Jack understood the profound potential of mornings reclaimed, of purpose embraced, and of life transformed not by external validation, but by the disciplined act of starting, every single day, before the world demanded attention. Jack woke to a pale morning light filtering through the blinds, the soft hum of dawn pressing gently against the walls of his home. He moved with the quiet purpose that had become ritual, carrying his coffee to the garage where the solar car sat waiting, a small testament to persistence and reclaimed agency. The past weeks had transformed the space. Dust now seemed less like neglect and more like evidence of time past, a canvas for new beginnings. Jack ran his hands over the car's chassis, noting the subtle improvements since yesterday, and felt a thrill of anticipation for the day's work. Today was different. He resolved to push the project beyond the safe routines, to test limits he had avoided for fear of failure, to confront the uncertainty that had always whispered that he was too old, too slow, too disconnected to matter. Elon Musk's words echoed in his mind, precise and uncompromising: failure is an option here. If things are not failing, you are not innovating enough. Jack sipped his coffee, the warmth spreading through his chest, grounding him as he knelt beside the car. Each connection, each gear, each solar panel adjustment was deliberate, meticulous, yet filled with a willingness to embrace imperfection. The morning light shifted across the garage floor as he worked, highlighting the dust particles dancing in the air, each speck catching the light like tiny stars in a constellation of potential. Jack connected the final wire, held his breath, and let the car roll across the improvised track. It moved smoothly, gliding farther than before, almost as if it sensed his renewed confidence. He allowed himself a small smile, a flicker of triumph, yet he knew the test was only beginning. He needed to push beyond incremental progress, to experiment with angles, materials, and energy capture to see how far the vehicle could really go. Jack adjusted the solar panel's tilt and shadowed one side with a makeshift cardboard sunblock, observing the car's performance with intense scrutiny. Each trial was a lesson, each failure a nudge toward understanding, each success a spark that fueled further experimentation. Emma appeared at the doorway, her eyes wide with curiosity and excitement. "Grandpa, it's going faster than yesterday," she exclaimed, her energy infusing the garage with life. Together, they experimented, testing the solar car on slightly uneven surfaces, noting how minor changes affected speed and stability. Jack felt a surge of joy not just in the vehicle's performance, but in the act of teaching and sharing, the bridge between generations strengthening with every moment. Yet as hours passed, fatigue crept in, the aches of age reminding him that persistence had its limits. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the motor assembly for inspection, and his knees protested as he bent repeatedly to test the car on different surfaces. He paused, breathing deeply, acknowledging the physical constraints without letting them define the outcome. The inner war had shifted. It was no longer just fear of failure but a negotiation with his body, with time, with the reality that the energy he once took for granted now had to be measured, managed, and respected. Jack's mind wandered briefly to his past, decades of work, missed moments with his children, the estrangement that had grown like a quiet vine over years of distraction and self-doubt. He realized that this project, this morning ritual, was more than a hobby, it was a reclamation of lost time, a dialogue with the person he had been, the parent he wanted to be, the man he still could become. Emma handed him a small screwdriver, her hands steady and sure despite her youth, and Jack felt the intimacy of collaboration, the way shared purpose amplified resilience. Each adjustment brought small victories, a motor that ran smoother, a wheel that aligned better, a solar panel angle that captured just a touch more energy. Jack's heart swelled with satisfaction, not the fleeting pleasure of accomplishment, but the enduring thrill of deliberate action and problem-solving. As the sun climbed higher, Jack decided to attempt a more ambitious test, moving the car outside into direct sunlight on the driveway, to see if the energy collected could power it over a longer distance. The thought was both exciting and terrifying, the driveway was uneven, the angle unpredictable, and failure was more likely, more visible. Yet he reminded himself of Musk's words, embrace failure, learn, iterate. Preparation was meticulous. Jack cleared the driveway, set up markers for distance, adjusted the car's panels, and double-checked each connection. Emma assisted, her youthful enthusiasm a counterbalance to Jack's cautious precision. Together, they released the car. It rolled smoothly at first, then began to wobble slightly as it navigated uneven pavement. Jack held his breath, heart pounding, as the vehicle continued farther than he expected, spinning slightly, correcting its course, and finally crossing the farthest marker they had set. Triumph surged through him, a mixture of relief, pride, and the intoxicating knowledge that risk and persistence had yielded tangible results. Jack's body, though sore, felt alive in a way that sitting at a desk or watching TV had never achieved. The solar car was more than a project, it was a symbol of capability reclaimed, of mornings intentionally structured, of purpose rediscovered. That evening, Jack reflected on the day. The inner war was far from over. The physical limitations, the doubts, the questions about relevance and legacy persisted. Yet he had tested limits, embraced uncertainty, and demonstrated resilience. He felt a quiet but profound shift, fear no longer dominated, curiosity and deliberate action had taken precedence. His confidence in his ability to create, to influence, to engage with life meaningfully, had grown exponentially. Jack recognized that testing limits was not simply about the solar car's performance but about reclaiming his agency in every facet of life. The discipline cultivated in morning spilled over into other areas, he exercised with more intent, prepared meals with care, interacted with neighbors and family with renewed presence. The ritual of creation had reshaped not only his schedule but his identity. He began to plan further experiments, refining the motor, exploring new materials, documenting outcomes, even considering sharing the project online to inspire others who felt constrained by age or circumstance. The idea was daunting, yet invigorating. Jack realized that purposeful mornings had transformed his perspective, failure was not a verdict but a lesson, imperfection a guide, and persistence a pathway to mastery. As twilight settled, he cleaned the garage, organized tools, and reviewed notes from the day. Emma helped enthusiastically, her laughter and observations a reminder that creation was inherently social, that legacy was built not in isolation but through shared experience. Jack felt a warmth in his chest, a recognition that the smallest victories, accumulated with intention, had the power to reshape life. That night, he reflected on the inner war. The battle between fear and hope had evolved into a balance between action and restraint, between ambition and physical reality, between learning and judgment. Mornings had become a laboratory for life, a practice ground where limitations could be explored, boundaries pushed, and resilience cultivated. Jack whispered to himself, I am still capable. I am still learning. I am still creating. The words felt heavy with truth, no longer mere affirmation but lived reality. Over the next weeks, the solar car advanced steadily. Jack refined circuits, tested alternative materials, and documented progress meticulously. Each morning brought a renewed sense of purpose, a structured approach to creativity that had once seemed lost. Emma's involvement deepened, her questions prompting Jack to articulate not just the mechanics but the principles of problem-solving, resilience, and iterative learning. Jack noticed changes in his own perception of time. Where once mornings had felt slow and oppressive, they now unfolded with intention and energy. The quiet hours before the world stirred became a sanctuary, a space in which past failures were acknowledged but did not define him, and future possibilities emerged with clarity and anticipation. One morning, after a particularly successful outdoor test, Jack and Emma celebrated quietly. The solar car had performed flawlessly, covering the distance smoothly, and minor adjustments had optimized efficiency. The triumph was not ostentatious but deeply satisfying. Jack reflected on the journey, the months of fear, doubt, and inertia that had preceded this period of disciplined mornings, the small but meaningful victories that had compounded into confidence and competence, the rekindling of a sense of agency that extended far beyond the garage. Jack realized that testing limits, confronting uncertainty, and embracing small risks were central to transformation. It was not just the solar car that had improved, he himself had changed. He felt stronger, sharper, more engaged, and more connected. The inner war, once a constant battle against despair, invisibility, and resignation, had transformed into a deliberate negotiation with life's constraints, a mastery of action over hesitation, curiosity over fear, and persistence over passivity. Jack knew there would be setbacks, physical aches, moments of doubt, and failures along the way. But he also understood that the structure he had built, the ritual of mornings, the act of deliberate creation, provided a foundation resilient enough to withstand obstacles. The solar car had become both a project and a metaphor. Incremental progress, sustained by discipline and courage, yielded outcomes that exceeded expectation. That evening, Jack cleaned the garage meticulously, noting the placement of tools, the organization of materials, and the progress documented in notebooks. Emma hugged him before leaving, her presence a reminder that connection, legacy, and collaboration were inseparable from personal transformation. Jack lingered, reflecting on Elon Musk's influence, not as a directive to imitate, but as a spark of possibility, a model for fearless commitment to action and deliberate pursuit of meaningful goals. He whispered once more, "I am capable. I am still creating. I am still here." The inner war had evolved, yet he felt prepared, resilient, and inspired. Mornings were no longer simply the start of a day, they were a crucible of transformation, a space where age, doubt, and inertia could be challenged and overcome, a daily affirmation that the capacity to matter, to create, and to connect endured regardless of the years behind him. Jack understood that the journey ahead would require persistence, courage, and experimentation, but for the first time in decades, he felt equipped to meet it with intention. The solar car's hum was a soundtrack of renewal, a daily reminder that action, consistency, and purpose were more powerful than fear, regret, or the passage of time. And as he turned off the lights and closed the garage door, Jack felt the quiet confidence that comes from knowing one is actively shaping life rather than passively enduring it, ready to rise again with the dawn, to embrace mornings as instruments of transformation, and to continue testing limits, refining purpose, and reclaiming the life he had long believed lost. Jack woke that morning with a restless energy, the air crisp with the first hints of autumn, sunlight spilling pale and golden across the floorboards. The garage smelled of sawdust, coffee, and the faint metallic tang of the solar car, each breath grounding him in the reality of creation and possibility. Today felt different, he could sense it in his chest, a quiet tension mingled with anticipation. The past weeks of disciplined mornings had brought progress, but now there was a feeling that something significant was about to occur, a breakthrough that would transcend incremental victories. He brewed his coffee, savoring the ritual, and stepped into the garage, Emma following closely, notebook in hand, eyes wide with excitement. "Grandpa, do you think it can actually go farther than before?" she asked, voice filled with innocent curiosity. Jack smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "We'll find out today," he said, feeling the weight of anticipation and the subtle tremor of fear, the fear that even this step might fall short, that years of effort might culminate in disappointment. But he refused to let fear dictate action. He had learned, through the quiet, relentless practice of mornings, that preparation and discipline could overcome hesitation. Jack knelt beside the solar car, checking connections, aligning gears, and adjusting the solar panel with precision. Each movement was deliberate, a balance of muscle memory and mindful attention. Emma mirrored his movements, her youthful energy infusing the space with vibrancy. Together, they reviewed notes, diagrams, and previous test results, refining the approach for the ambitious trial ahead. The driveway outside had been cleared, markers placed, and the path mapped for optimal sunlight exposure. Jack took a deep breath, feeling the early warmth of the sun on his skin, and whispered to himself, "This is it. Focus. Start before you feel ready." The first release was tentative. The car rolled forward, stuttering slightly over uneven patches, then found its rhythm, gliding further than any previous attempt. Jack's heart leapt as he observed the motion, a visceral thrill coursing through him. Emma clapped, eyes sparkling. "It's working, Grandpa. Look at it go." Jack allowed himself a smile but remained focused, analyzing the performance with meticulous attention. Minor wobble on the left wheel prompted a quick adjustment, a small tweak to stabilize trajectory. They released the car again, and this time it moved with remarkable smoothness, gliding further and faster than ever before. Triumph surged, but Jack resisted the urge to celebrate prematurely. He knew that true breakthroughs were rarely singular, they were iterative, cumulative, and fragile until fully understood. The breakthrough, he sensed, was not just mechanical but personal, the recognition that persistence, discipline, and deliberate action could yield results beyond expectation, that morning's reclaimed could transform identity, purpose, and agency. Over the next hour, they experimented with variations, tilting the solar panel to catch optimal sunlight, adjusting weight distribution, modifying gear alignment. Each test revealed insights, small corrections that amplified performance. Jack's mind, once dulled by years of resignation, buzzed with clarity, problem-solving, and anticipation. His hands, though creaky, moved with precision born of repeated practice and renewed confidence. Emma laughed and scribbled notes, recording observations, asking questions that prompted Jack to articulate not just technique but principle. The importance of iteration, the courage to test boundaries, and the resilience to embrace failure as a step toward mastery. By midday, the solar car had surpassed all previous benchmarks. It rolled smoothly across the driveway, responding to adjustments with predictable precision. Jack's chest swelled with a profound sense of accomplishment, not merely for the technical success but for the transformation it symbolized. The inner war, the battle against doubt, inertia, and resignation, had shifted. Fear still lingered, a quiet presence at the edge of consciousness, but it no longer dictated action. Hope, discipline, and curiosity now guided every movement. Jack realized that this breakthrough, while tangible in the solar car's performance, reflected a deeper truth: capability, creativity, and relevance were not extinguished by age, they could be rekindled through deliberate action and sustained commitment. After the trial, Jack and Emma sat on the porch, watching the sunlight shift across the driveway. He reflected on the journey, the months of fear, doubt, missed opportunities, and incremental victories that had culminated in this moment. He thought about Elon Musk, whose words had initially sparked the disciplined mornings, and recognized that Musk's example was less about technical brilliance and more about the courage to start, to act consistently, to embrace uncertainty with relentless curiosity. Jack allowed himself to feel the full weight of transformation. The mornings had become a crucible, shaping not just his skills but his identity, self-perception, and emotional resilience. He felt a quiet pride in his ability to reclaim agency, to create, and to connect across generations. That evening, Jack documented the breakthrough in meticulous detail. Notes, photographs, diagrams, and reflections filled pages of his notebook. The act of recording was itself transformative, reinforcing lessons learned and providing a tangible record of progress and persistence. Emma added sketches and observations, their collaboration strengthening bonds and highlighting the generational continuity of curiosity, problem-solving, and creativity. Jack noticed subtle physical changes as well. His back, once stiff with years of neglect, felt more flexible, his hands steadier, his mind sharper and more alert. He attributed these shifts to the morning discipline, the structured engagement with meaningful work, and the cumulative satisfaction of incremental achievement. The breakthrough was more than technical, it was holistic, touching mind, body, and spirit. Over the following days, Jack refined the solar car further. He experimented with materials, testing lighter components to increase efficiency, adjusting solar panel angles for maximal energy capture, and iterating motor performance. Each session built on previous insights, compounding skill, confidence, and understanding. Emma's presence remained a vital element, her curiosity and enthusiasm amplifying motivation and sustaining focus. Jack observed that breakthroughs, whether in invention or life, were rarely singular moments but the product of repeated action, reflection, and adaptation. The discipline cultivated in mornings had created conditions for discovery, resilience, and sustained engagement. He also noticed the psychological transformation. The persistent anxiety, resignation, and self-doubt that had once defined his days had receded. In their place was a calm, focused energy, a recognition that action, rather than perfection or external validation, was the currency of transformation. Each morning reaffirmed this truth. Jack began to imagine sharing the process online, documenting the journey to inspire others who felt constrained by age, circumstance, or fear. The idea was both thrilling and intimidating, yet he recognized that risk, like experimentation, was necessary for growth. He resolved to start small, photographs, notes, and short reflections on the learning process. The breakthrough was not just the car, it was the realization that agency, creativity, and purpose could be reignited regardless of age. Jack understood that mornings were not merely hours of productivity but instruments of transformation, where fear could be tempered, curiosity harnessed, and incremental action compounded into profound change. One morning, after a flawless outdoor test, Jack and Emma celebrated quietly. They reviewed data, observed performance, and shared reflections. The solar car moved smoothly across the driveway, its motion a testament to persistence, deliberate action, and incremental learning. Jack felt a swell of pride, not in the object itself, but in the disciplined engagement that had made it possible. He whispered to himself, "I am still creating. I am still learning. I am still here." That evening, Jack reflected on the journey. He realized that the inner war, fear versus hope, inertia versus action, had transformed into a disciplined negotiation between ambition, capability, and intentionality. He had learned that transformation was iterative, fragile until nurtured, and amplified by deliberate, consistent engagement. Mornings had become the crucible in which skills, confidence, and resilience were forged. Over the weeks, Jack's confidence extended beyond the garage. Conversations with his children became more engaged, interactions with neighbors more deliberate, and even social encounters more intentional. He noticed subtle improvements in posture, endurance, and focus. The mornings had reshaped his perception of self, time, and potential. Jack realized that breakthroughs, whether in invention or life, were born from disciplined action, not passive hope. The solar car symbolized that principle, a tangible manifestation of persistence, courage, and reclaimed agency. One morning, after successfully optimizing motor performance and solar efficiency, Jack paused to reflect. The vehicle hummed softly on the track, moving with smooth precision. He looked at Emma, who mirrored his satisfaction, and allowed himself a rare moment of quiet pride. The breakthroughs were not merely technical, they were deeply personal, affirming the capacity to create, to matter, and to connect. Jack recognized that mornings, deliberately reclaimed, had become more than a schedule, they were instruments of transformation, shaping skill, character, and identity. He understood that action, consistency, and reflection were more powerful than fear, regret, or the passage of time. That evening, Jack cleaned the garage, organizing tools, reviewing notes, and savoring the quiet satisfaction of progress. The inner war had evolved, it was now a balance between ambition and patience, experimentation and reflection, courage and discipline. He felt prepared for the challenges ahead, buoyed by the knowledge that incremental action, repeated consistently, could yield profound results. Jack whispered to himself, "I am capable. I am still creating. I am still here." The breakthrough, he realized, was not simply the solar car's improved performance but the transformation of his identity, habits, and perception of possibility. Mornings had become a daily affirmation of agency, a sacred space where limitations could be tested, curiosity nurtured, and resilience strengthened. The solar car's hum was a constant reminder of what deliberate action, courage, and persistence could achieve, a testament that life's potential was not constrained by age. And as Jack closed the garage door and stepped into the fading light, he felt a profound sense of readiness and anticipation, prepared to rise again with the dawn, to embrace mornings as instruments of transformation, and to continue building, learning, and creating in a life reclaimed. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jack woke to the familiar quiet of the early morning, the sky still a pale blue-gray, the air crisp with the lingering chill of autumn. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of floorboards beneath his steps. Mornings had become sacred, a time carved deliberately for action, reflection, and creation. The solar car sat waiting in the garage, its gleaming surface catching the first rays of sun that filtered through the windows. Jack brewed his coffee, the aroma grounding him, and carried it to the garage, feeling a sense of anticipation thrumming beneath his chest. Today's mission was different. The car had been performing flawlessly in controlled tests, but now Jack wanted to share the project beyond the walls of his home, to connect with others, to reach out and see if his reclaimed mornings could ripple outward and inspire. He thought of Elon Musk's words again, "The first step to changing the world is to show up and do the work." That phrase echoed in Jack's mind like a challenge and a promise. He positioned the solar car carefully under the sunlight, adjusting the panels to optimize energy absorption, and recorded a short video on his phone. His hands, though slightly trembling with age, were steady in purpose. He spoke clearly, explaining the project, detailing the process, and reflecting on the personal journey the mornings had created. Emma hovered beside him, her eyes wide and attentive, occasionally chiming in with observations or questions that highlighted the depth of their collaboration. Jack hesitated before posting the video online. Doubt crept in. Would anyone care? Would his efforts be judged as quaint, irrelevant, or foolish? Yet he reminded himself that action mattered more than approval, that connection began with vulnerability, and that sharing his journey could create ripples beyond what he imagined. With a deep breath, he uploaded the video, adding a brief caption, "Reclaiming mornings, one small creation at a time." #NeverTooOld #Morning Rituals. Immediately, Jack felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration, a thrill at having taken a bold step into the unknown. Over the next hours, he returned to refining the solar car, adjusting gears, testing motor alignment, and noting performance metrics. Emma sketched diagrams and wrote observations, her energy and curiosity a constant reminder that creation was amplified through collaboration. As notifications began to appear on the video, Jack watched with fascination. Comments trickled in, a retired engineer praising ingenuity, a teenager curious about the project, a fellow older adult expressing inspiration to start a long-delayed project of their own. The responses were small at first, but meaningful. Jack realized that reaching out had created connection, that his mornings, discipline, and purpose had the power to inspire others. He reflected on the months of work, the mornings reclaimed from fear and inertia, and felt a profound sense of validation. Not validation in a superficial sense, but in the realization that effort, courage, and deliberate action mattered beyond his immediate world. Encouraged, Jack decided to take the next step. He drafted a message to his estranged son, Michael, who had been distant for years, strained by misunderstandings and silence. Jack typed slowly, choosing words with care, "I've been working on a project, building a solar car. It's reminded me that it's never too late to create, to try, to reconnect. I'd like to share it with you, if you're willing. The cursor blinked as Jack stared at the screen, heart pounding. The fear of rejection was real, yet he understood that inaction had already created distance. By reaching out, he reclaimed not only mornings and purpose but the possibility of reconciliation and human connection. Hours passed, and Jack continued working in the garage, adjusting solar panels, realigning the motor, and testing the car under changing light conditions. The driveway was bathed in a warm, late-morning glow, the vehicle gliding smoothly across it, a tangible testament to months of disciplined effort. Emma's presence was grounding. She handed him tools, offered insights, and celebrated each small success with unabashed enthusiasm. Around midday, a notification pinged on Jack's phone. It was a message from Michael. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "Dad, I saw the video. I didn't know you were working on something like this. I'd love to come by and see it." Relief, joy, and a quiet sense of vindication washed over Jack. The mornings, discipline, and persistent effort had not only transformed his own life but had opened the door to reconnect with family. He shared the news with Emma, who hugged him tightly, her excitement mingling with his own. That evening, Michael arrived. There was an initial awkwardness, a careful negotiation of old grievances and unspoken emotions, but as Jack showed him the solar car, walked him through the process, and shared the lessons learned from months of disciplined mornings, the tension eased. Michael's eyes reflected genuine curiosity and admiration, and Jack felt the warmth of connection that had long been absent. They spent hours together in the garage, adjusting gears, testing the solar car, and sharing stories. Jack realized that the breakthrough was not only mechanical but emotional. The deliberate mornings had built not just a vehicle, but a bridge to reconciliation, understanding, and renewed family bonds. Over the next weeks, Jack continued to document progress online. The videos attracted more viewers, many older adults expressing inspiration to reclaim mornings, tackle long-delayed projects, or reconnect with loved ones. Comments of encouragement and shared stories created a small but vibrant community, reinforcing Jack's belief that disciplined action and sharing of personal transformation could ripple outward. Mornings became a sacred space for growth, creation, and connection. Jack noticed that the inner war, the ongoing struggle between fear, inertia, and self-doubt, had shifted once more. Fear had not vanished, but it was managed, contained, and redirected into productive action. Inertia was replaced by momentum, and self-doubt became a tool for reflection rather than a barrier to progress. Jack observed subtle transformations in himself beyond skill and discipline. His posture improved, his movements more deliberate, and his mind sharper and more engaged. Socially, he interacted with neighbors, friends, and family with renewed confidence and presence. The mornings reclaimed had reshaped not only his habits but his perception of self, his agency, and his capacity to influence and inspire. One morning, as Jack and Emma prepared for another test of the solar car, he reflected on the broader lessons of the journey. Purpose, he realized, was cultivated daily through deliberate action. Reconnection and influence were not incidental but the product of consistent, meaningful engagement. The inner war, once dominated by fear and resignation, had transformed into a disciplined negotiation with life's challenges, mediated by curiosity, courage, and persistent effort. The solar car became both a project and a symbol, a tangible manifestation of incremental progress, iterative learning, and reclaimed identity. Each release, each adjustment, each successful test run reinforced not only technical skill but confidence, resilience, and agency. Jack began to dream bigger, imagining workshops with local seniors, mentoring programs for young engineers, and collaborations that combined his experience with the energy of younger generations. The mornings, once merely a framework for productivity, had become a crucible for transformation and possibility, bridging past regrets with future potential. As autumn deepened, the solar car project continued to thrive. Jack refined the motor, optimized solar efficiency, and documented every iteration meticulously. Emma's engagement deepened, her insights and questions challenging Jack to articulate principles, solve problems creatively, and embrace continual learning. Together, they celebrated small victories, learned from failures, and nurtured a shared sense of purpose and accomplishment. Jack also noticed psychological transformations. The persistent anxiety and resignation that had once defined him were replaced with focus, calm, and anticipation. Mornings had become a sanctuary for disciplined engagement, a space where fear was acknowledged but transformed into productive energy. Incremental victories, compounded over time, reinforced confidence, identity, and self-efficacy. One evening, after a particularly successful trial of the solar car, Jack and Michael shared a quiet moment on the porch. The vehicle hummed softly in the driveway, reflecting months of effort, experimentation, and disciplined mornings. Michael admitted his admiration for the dedication, curiosity, and resilience Jack had demonstrated. Jack felt the profound satisfaction of connecting, influencing, and sharing purpose, proof that mornings reclaimed could ripple far beyond the garage walls. Over subsequent days, Jack began planning further outreach, small online tutorials, community workshops, and documentation of lessons learned. The inner war had evolved yet again. Now it was a negotiation between ambition, sustainability, and focus, guided by the realization that disciplined mornings, purposeful action, and deliberate sharing could transform not only his own life but the lives of others. The solar car continued to improve, and with each test, each iteration, each shared insight, Jack felt a sense of fulfillment that transcended age, circumstance, or past regrets. He whispered quietly to himself, "I am capable. I am still creating. I am still here. I can still connect, inspire, and matter." That night, as he closed the garage door and prepared for rest, Jack reflected on the journey. The mornings had become a sacred space for agency, transformation, and connection. Fear, doubt, and resignation had not disappeared, but had been reframed and harnessed through disciplined action. Incremental victories had compounded into profound personal and relational breakthroughs. And as he lay in bed, he felt a quiet anticipation for the next dawn, the next morning, the next opportunity to rise, create, connect, and continue reclaiming life on his own terms. Jack woke to the soft golden light of morning spilling through the blinds, the house quiet except for the distant hum of a passing car and the occasional chirp of early birds. The mornings had become sacred, a disciplined ritual that defined not just the hours but the essence of his reclaimed life. He brewed his coffee with careful attention, inhaling the aroma as a reminder of routine, intention, and presence. Carrying it to the garage, he felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. The solar car sat gleaming under the morning sun, a testament to weeks of persistent work, meticulous refinement, and disciplined mornings that had reshaped both his skills and his identity. Emma was already there, notebook in hand, sketching diagrams and jotting observations. She looked up and smiled. "Grandpa, do you think the video will get more people interested today?" Jack smiled back, feeling warmth spread through him. "We'll see," he said, sipping his coffee. "But every action matters, even if it reaches only one person." That morning, Jack decided to take a step he had been contemplating, expanding the project beyond his immediate family and online viewers to the local community. Inspired by the encouragement of neighbors, the comments online, and the reconnection with his son Michael, he drafted a plan to host a small demonstration at the local senior center. The idea both excited and terrified him. Sharing personal effort publicly had always carried risk, but he reminded himself of Elon Musk's insistence on action over hesitation, on the necessity of embracing uncertainty to achieve meaningful impact. Jack spent the morning refining the solar car, testing motor alignment, adjusting the solar panel angle, and calibrating the gear ratio for optimal performance. Emma assisted eagerly, asking questions that prompted deeper reflection and articulation of principles behind each adjustment. They filmed a short demonstration video to share with the senior center organizers, highlighting not just the mechanics of the car but the story behind its creation, the discipline of mornings, the iterative learning, and the reclaiming of purpose. That afternoon, Jack received confirmation. The senior center welcomed him to present and invited a small group of residents to witness the demonstration. Jack felt a thrill of nervous anticipation. It had been years since he had engaged publicly in any creative or technical capacity, and the idea of sharing his reclaimed mornings and accomplishments filled him with both excitement and apprehension. The day of the demonstration, Jack arrived early, bringing the solar car, notes, diagrams, and a portable display for visuals. The community room was modest, sunlight spilling through windows onto the tables arranged in a semicircle. Residents, mostly older adults, greeted him with polite curiosity. Jack felt a familiar tug of doubt but reminded himself to focus on the purpose, not on potential judgment. He began by sharing his story, how mornings, once idle and passive, had been reclaimed through disciplined action, how small but consistent efforts had compounded into tangible results, and how the process had rekindled not just skill but purpose and connection. The room listened attentively, some nodding in recognition, others leaning forward with curiosity. Jack demonstrated the solar car's movement, explaining the mechanics, solar energy capture, and the iterative process that had led to its current state. He emphasized the broader lesson, that agency, creativity, and growth were possible at any age. Questions followed, thoughtful and engaged. Residents asked about materials, solar efficiency, and personal motivation. Jack responded with humility, sharing both successes and failures, illustrating that setbacks were not endpoints but learning opportunities. One woman, Martha, asked, "Do you really think we can start projects at our age?" Jack smiled warmly. "Absolutely. It's never too late. What matters is showing up every day, doing what you can, and embracing the process." Encouraged by her question, he shared anecdotes about reconnecting with his son, collaborating with Emma, and the emotional fulfillment derived from persistent, meaningful action. The room seemed to shift subtly, a collective recognition that potential was not bound by years, and that deliberate engagement could spark transformation. After the demonstration, residents approached Jack individually, sharing their own stories of deferred dreams, long-delayed projects, and the longing to reclaim purpose. They thanked him for inspiration, for proof that action mattered, and for showing that discipline and curiosity could overcome inertia and doubt. Jack felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The mornings, the solar car, the videos, and the small acts of consistent effort had ripple effects far beyond his garage. He realized that the combination of personal discipline, deliberate action, and vulnerability in sharing experience could influence and empower others in ways he had never imagined. Returning home, Jack reflected on the day. The inner war, the persistent tension between fear, doubt, and hesitation, had transformed into a balance between courage, curiosity, and disciplined engagement. Fear had not vanished, but it was contained, redirected into purposeful action. Each morning now reinforced not just skill or accomplishment but the capacity to inspire, connect, and reclaim relevance. Over the next weeks, Jack continued to build on the ripple effect. He posted updates online, documenting refinements, test results, and reflections. Responses increased, not dramatically, but meaningfully. Messages arrived from older adults inspired to start long-delayed projects, to engage with family, or to reclaim mornings in ways that fostered skill, purpose, and connection. Jack realized that the ripple effect extended beyond technical accomplishment, it touched identity, agency, and emotional resilience. Mornings became a laboratory for creativity, reflection, and outreach. Each sunrise brought a renewed sense of purpose, a structured opportunity to act deliberately, to create, and to influence others positively. Jack observed that the ripple effect was amplified by collaboration. Emma's participation provided energy, insight, and perspective, reinforcing the idea that transformation was both individual and relational. The solar car became a symbol, a tangible manifestation of what disciplined, consistent action could achieve, and a bridge between generations, communities, and life stages. He also noticed personal transformations beyond skill and social connection. His focus sharpened, his endurance improved, and his capacity for patient, deliberate action strengthened. The mornings reclaimed had reshaped not just his schedule but his perception of self, his confidence, and his ability to affect change. One morning, Jack received a message from a former colleague, expressing admiration and a desire to collaborate on documenting the solar car's development. The interaction reinforced a profound lesson, that disciplined action, consistently applied, not only transformed personal outcomes but could attract opportunity, connection, and collaboration across previously dormant networks. That afternoon, Jack worked on enhancing the solar car's efficiency, experimenting with new materials, motor calibration, and panel angles. Each adjustment, each test, each observation reinforced the interplay between persistence, creativity, and tangible results. Emma took photographs and notes, the process a shared ritual that deepened their bond and amplified learning. Jack reflected on the cumulative effect. Incremental improvements, disciplined mornings, and deliberate outreach had created a trajectory of transformation that extended beyond the garage into family, community, and personal growth. By evening, the solar car glided flawlessly across the driveway, its movement a quiet testament to disciplined effort, persistence, and experimentation. Jack felt satisfaction not merely in performance but in the broader narrative of mornings reclaimed, fear confronted, and purpose realized. He understood that ripple effects, small actions influencing others, were not always immediate or dramatic, but they accumulated, compounded, and resonated in unexpected ways. The inner war had evolved yet again. Fear and doubt were now allies in the sense that they provided calibration, signals to act deliberately, and reminders of the stakes. Action, reflection, and connection were now the dominant currents guiding Jack's days. Over subsequent weeks, Jack continued outreach, additional demonstrations, online tutorials, and documentation of process and lessons learned. Responses grew steadily, comments expressing curiosity, inspiration, and shared commitment to reclaiming mornings, pursuing delayed projects, and embracing agency at any age. Jack realized that the ripple effect was self-reinforcing, consistent action inspired others, which in turn reinforced his own commitment, creating a cycle of growth, influence, and purpose. The mornings had become sacred, not merely for productivity but for sustained transformation. Jack observed physical and emotional shifts, greater endurance, sharper focus, improved posture, and a strengthened sense of identity. The disciplined practice of mornings, reclaimed from fear, inertia, and resignation, had created a foundation for ongoing growth, connection, and influence. One morning, as Jack and Emma prepared for another outdoor demonstration, he paused to reflect. The solar car glided smoothly across the driveway, the sunlight casting long shadows that danced with each rotation of the wheels. He recognized that the transformation was not just in mechanics but in mindset, habit, and relational connection. The ripple effect had extended from personal discipline to family, community, and online networks. Jack whispered quietly, "Mornings matter. Action matters. Connection matters. Age does not define potential." That evening, after cleaning and organizing the garage, Jack reflected on the journey. The ripple effect, once a vague aspiration, had become tangible, inspired neighbors, reconnected family, and meaningful online engagement. The inner war was ongoing, but now it was guided by purpose, courage, and deliberate action. Each morning represented opportunity, each small victory compounded into greater confidence and influence, and each shared experience extended the circle of impact. Jack realized that transformation was iterative, relational, and grounded in daily discipline. The solar car was not merely a vehicle, it was a metaphor, a testament, and a bridge to purpose, identity, and connection. And as he closed the garage door, he felt the quiet anticipation that had become familiar, the thrill of rising with the sun, the excitement of deliberate creation, and the satisfaction of knowing that mornings reclaimed had the power to ripple outward, shaping not only his life but the lives of others, inspiring action, connection, and transformation in ways both tangible and profound. Jack woke before dawn, the world outside still cloaked in shadow, the air crisp and slightly damp with the promise of early autumn. Mornings had become a sacred rhythm, each day a disciplined exercise in creation, reflection, and purpose. The solar car gleamed under the garage lights, its polished panels reflecting Jack's focused gaze. Today's work felt heavier, more consequential. Beyond testing circuits and calibrating motors, Jack sensed that he was confronting more than mechanical challenges. He was confronting the shadows of fear, doubt, and long-buried regret that had lurked in the corners of his life for decades. He brewed his coffee, savoring the warmth, and carried it to the garage. Emma was already there, notebook in hand, eyes wide with curiosity and determination. "Grandpa, are we going to try the big test today?" she asked, her excitement barely contained. Jack smiled, feeling a flutter of nerves mixed with anticipation. "Yes, today we push it further. We see what it can really do. But remember, it's not just the car, it's about us testing limits, learning, and facing fears." The inner war had evolved over months of disciplined mornings. Fear was no longer a vague, paralyzing force but a tangible adversary, one that whispered doubts about capability, relevance, and age. Jack knew that confronting it required deliberate action, structured effort, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. The solar car was both the instrument and the symbol of that confrontation. Jack began the morning by meticulously inspecting every component of the vehicle, tightening loose screws, calibrating motor alignment, and adjusting the solar panels to capture maximum energy. Each movement was deliberate, precise, and infused with purpose. Emma mirrored his attention to detail, offering observations and asking questions that prompted Jack to articulate both process and principle. By mid-morning, the car was ready for the most ambitious test yet. A longer outdoor track with uneven terrain and subtle inclines, simulating real-world conditions that would challenge stability, efficiency, and performance. Jack positioned the vehicle carefully, adjusting angles, checking connections, and noting environmental factors such as sunlight direction, surface texture, and wind resistance. He felt a flutter of anxiety but reminded himself that fear was a signal, not a barrier, a guide for careful action rather than a verdict of incapacity. Emma held the control pad, her small hands steady despite her excitement. "Ready, Grandpa?" she asked. Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. "Ready." The solar car rolled forward, initial motion smooth and precise, then encountered uneven pavement. It wobbled slightly, threatening to tip, yet Jack had anticipated this. With subtle adjustments to the motor and panel angle, he guided it back into balance. Heart pounding, he watched the vehicle traverse the track, maintaining speed, stability, and energy efficiency. Each success was tempered by vigilance, a reminder that mastery required continuous attention, learning, and adaptation. After several trials, the solar car completed the course flawlessly, moving farther and faster than ever before. Triumph surged through Jack, yet he resisted complacency. The breakthrough was technical but also deeply emotional. The mornings, discipline, and deliberate action had transformed fear from a paralyzing force into a navigable challenge. Jack realized that confronting old fears was iterative. Each trial, each adjustment, each incremental success chipped away at self-doubt, replacing it with confidence, competence, and resilience. He felt a profound shift. Fear no longer dictated his actions, it informed them, sharpened them, and amplified awareness. That afternoon, Jack shared the progress with Michael and Emma. They reviewed footage, analyzed performance data, and discussed potential improvements. Michael asked questions that revealed a deeper engagement than Jack had expected, highlighting not just technical curiosity but an appreciation for the courage and persistence required to confront long-standing fears. The conversation left Jack with a quiet satisfaction. The ripple effect of disciplined mornings and deliberate action extended beyond personal accomplishment to connection, influence, and mentorship. Over the next week, Jack focused on refining the solar car's energy capture, experimenting with new materials for the panels and chassis, and testing incremental improvements in motor performance. Each morning began with careful review, followed by hands-on work, reflection, and adjustment. The process was immersive, demanding, and invigorating. Jack noticed subtle changes in himself. Muscles strengthened from repeated precise movements, mental acuity sharpened from problem-solving and analysis, patience deepened from iterative testing and reflection. More profoundly, Jack felt emotionally resilient. The shadows of past regret, fear, and doubt no longer dominated his inner landscape. Instead, he experienced a measured calm, tempered by anticipation and curiosity. One morning, as Jack and Emma prepared for a particularly ambitious test, Jack paused and reflected on the journey. The inner war had been relentless, shaped by decades of inertia, fear, and deferred dreams. Yet disciplined mornings, persistent action, and deliberate engagement had transformed that war into a dialogue. Fear-guided focus, doubt-prompted reflection, and persistence produced tangible outcomes. Jack whispered quietly to himself, "I am still capable. I am still creating. I am still here." That day, he decided to document the full journey, the progression from initial hesitation, through failure, experimentation, and learning, to breakthrough performance. He filmed detailed explanations, highlighted challenges, and narrated reflections on confronting fear and reclaiming mornings. Emma assisted with filming, editing, and notations, ensuring the narrative was accessible, engaging, and emotionally resonant. Jack prepared the video for online sharing, aware that it could inspire others who struggled with fear, inertia, and self-doubt. Posting it required vulnerability. Fear flickered. What if no one cared? What if the effort seemed trivial? Yet Jack pressed forward, recognizing that transformation required exposure, action, and the willingness to embrace uncertainty. Within hours, responses began to arrive. Older adults shared their excitement, curiosity, and inspiration. Many revealed long-delayed dreams, expressing interest in reclaiming mornings, pursuing creative projects, or reconnecting with loved ones. Comments reflected both admiration and a shared sense of struggle, validating the journey Jack had undertaken. Encouraged, he responded thoughtfully, sharing additional insights and reflections. The ripple effect extended further than anticipated. Messages from family, friends, and community members revealed that small, deliberate actions could influence perception, motivation, and engagement. Jack realized that confronting old fears was not solely a personal endeavor, it had relational and communal dimensions, reinforcing the power of discipline, transparency, and action. Over subsequent mornings, Jack continued iterative testing, further refining motor calibration, solar efficiency, and chassis stability. Emma remained engaged, her energy, curiosity, and insights amplifying Jack's focus and motivation. Michael occasionally joined, providing perspective, asking questions, and participating in discussions that deepened family bonds and reinforced the value of intergenerational collaboration. Jack reflected on the transformation of fear. Once a paralyzing force, fear now acted as an ally, signaling challenges, guiding cautious experimentation, and heightening awareness. The inner war was not eliminated but managed, reshaped into deliberate engagement with uncertainty. Jack's confidence expanded beyond the garage. Conversations with neighbors, family, and online connections reflected a renewed sense of agency, competence, and relevance. He recognized that disciplined mornings had catalyzed both personal mastery and social impact. One morning, after a particularly successful outdoor test, Jack and Emma celebrated quietly. The solar car moved flawlessly across the uneven driveway, the sunlight glinting off its panels. Jack reflected on the months of disciplined mornings, iterative experimentation, and persistent engagement. The inner war, once dominated by fear, doubt, and resignation, had evolved into a framework for action, reflection, and incremental growth. The ripple effect extended from personal accomplishment to family connection, community inspiration, and online engagement. Jack realized that each morning represented a microcosm of transformation. Confronting fear, reclaiming agency, nurturing connection, and amplifying impact. Over the following days, Jack continued refinement, outreach, and documentation. Online videos, community workshops, and family collaborations reinforced the sense that mornings reclaimed could produce both technical mastery and meaningful social influence. The solar car was no longer merely a project, it was a symbol of resilience, curiosity, and the ongoing negotiation with fear and doubt. Jack's evenings were spent reflecting, recording insights, and planning subsequent mornings. Physical improvements, steadier hands, stronger posture, sharper focus, mirrored emotional and cognitive gains. The inner war, once relentless and dominating, was now structured, manageable, and productive. Jack recognized that the transformation was cumulative, iterative, and relational, built on consistent, deliberate action. One evening, as he closed the garage door and stepped into the fading light, Jack felt profound satisfaction. The solar car's hum was both literal and symbolic, a testament to disciplined mornings, the courage to confront fear, and the power of incremental action. He whispered quietly, "I am capable. I am still creating. I am still here. I am no longer defined by fear." As Jack lay in bed that night, he reflected on the journey from hesitation, doubt, and deferred dreams to accomplishment, connection, and reclaimed purpose. He understood that mornings, intentionally structured and persistently pursued, were instruments of transformation, capable of reshaping skill, identity, relationships, and perception of potential. And as sleep claimed him, he anticipated the next dawn, ready to rise, create, confront challenges, and continue testing limits, confident that the inner war, once oppressive, had been transformed into a guiding framework for action, growth, and meaningful impact. Jack woke to a soft orange glow spilling through the blinds, signaling the start of another crisp morning. The garage smelled faintly of sawdust, motor oil, and the lingering aroma of yesterday's coffee. Mornings had become more than a routine, they were sacred rituals, deliberate acts of creation, reflection, and personal reclamation. Today, however, carried a subtle tension that Jack couldn't shake. It wasn't the solar car itself or the technical challenges he anticipated, it was something different, something unanticipated. There was a stirring in the edges of his consciousness, a whisper of possibility, recognition, and the subtle promise of something larger than he had imagined. He brewed coffee, inhaling its warmth as a grounding ritual, and walked to the garage. The solar car gleamed in the early sunlight, polished panels reflecting months of iterative effort and disciplined mornings. Emma was already there, notebook in hand, sketching diagrams and jotting observations. "Grandpa," she said, eyes bright with anticipation, "someone commented on the video saying it's being shared at the local tech museum. They want to feature your solar car in a senior innovation showcase." Jack froze for a moment, disbelief and exhilaration mingling. Recognition? From a museum? It felt surreal. Months of early mornings, disciplined effort, and intimate victories in the garage suddenly had the possibility of broader acknowledgement. He felt the familiar flutter of nerves, doubt, anticipation, fear of inadequacy, but overlaid it with pride, a quiet affirmation that action, not circumstance, dictated outcome. Jack allowed himself a slow smile. "Well, Emma," he said, voice steady but filled with awe, "I guess we have more work to do." The next days were a whirlwind of preparation. Jack refined the solar car, ensuring every motor, gear, and solar panel was optimized. He recalibrated the energy capture system, experimented with minor adjustments to chassis weight distribution, and tested multiple iterations to ensure performance was flawless. Each morning began with careful planning, followed by precise execution, reflection, and adjustment. Emma was an indispensable partner, sketching schematics, taking notes, and providing questions that challenged Jack to articulate principles and anticipate challenges. Beyond technical preparation, Jack also contemplated the personal dimensions of recognition. Receiving acknowledgement from a broader community, especially one that valued creativity, innovation, and contribution, stirred emotions he had long buried, hope, pride, and the realization that effort, discipline, and courage could transcend age and circumstance. He recalled Elon Musk's persistent insistence on action over hesitation, on the courage to confront uncertainty, and on relentless pursuit of meaningful goals. Jack realized that recognition was not an entitlement but the byproduct of consistent effort, meticulous practice, and the willingness to embrace risk. When the day of the showcase arrived, Jack and Emma transported the solar car carefully, securing it in the display area of the museum. The room buzzed with anticipation, older adults, volunteers, and a few curious younger visitors milled about, some with skepticism, others with quiet curiosity. Jack felt a familiar tug of doubt but reminded himself to focus on the purpose, sharing the project, inspiring others, and reflecting the transformation born of disciplined mornings and persistent action. He began with a story, speaking directly to the audience about mornings reclaimed, the discipline that nurtured creativity, and the courage required to confront fear and self-doubt. He demonstrated the solar car's motion, explaining the principles of solar energy, motor efficiency, and iterative testing. Emma assisted, managing diagrams, taking questions, and showcasing observations that highlighted both technical insight and the relational dimension of their collaboration. As questions arose, Jack responded with humility and clarity. One visitor, a retired engineer, asked about the methodology behind iterative testing. Jack explained the importance of deliberate, small adjustments, the value of documenting every observation, and the mindset of embracing failure as a step toward mastery. Another visitor, Martha, asked, "Do you think we're ever too old to start something new?" Jack smiled, feeling the resonance of the question. Absolutely not. Age is a measurement of time, not potential. What matters is willingness to show up, act consistently, and embrace the process. The response from the audience was profound. Many older adults shared stories of deferred dreams, long-delayed projects, and the desire to reclaim purpose. Jack realized that recognition extended beyond technical accomplishment, it validated effort, reinforced identity, and sparked inspiration. Each interaction deepened his understanding that disciplined mornings, deliberate action, and willingness to share personal vulnerability could ripple outward, influencing, encouraging, and empowering others. Over the next hours, Jack engaged in discussions with museum organizers, volunteers, and visitors. He was invited to conduct workshops for seniors interested in technology, innovation, and creative projects. The recognition was unexpected, yet profoundly affirming. Jack felt a quiet satisfaction, not in accolades, but in the realization that persistent effort, disciplined mornings, and courageous action could impact broader communities and inspire connection across generations. Returning home that evening, Jack reflected on the journey from hesitant mornings in a quiet garage to public recognition. The inner war, the ongoing negotiation with fear, doubt, and self-doubt, had evolved once more. Fear was no longer a paralyzing force. It had become a guide, a signal for careful, deliberate action. Confidence, competence, and agency had replaced inertia, resignation, and hesitation. Jack realized that recognition was a byproduct of consistent engagement, purpose, and courageous sharing. It was not the goal but a reflection of mastery, persistence, and authentic effort. The ripple effect extended beyond the museum. Videos of the showcase were shared online, comments poured in from older adults inspired to reclaim mornings, initiate creative projects, and engage with family and community. Michael and Emma joined discussions, sharing insights and amplifying the message of perseverance, discipline, and the transformative power of small, consistent actions. Jack's mornings continued with disciplined focus. Refinement of the solar car persisted, alongside planning for workshops and tutorials. Each day reinforced lessons learned, incremental improvements compound into mastery, courage manifests in action, and fear transforms when approached deliberately. The solar car was more than a project, it was a symbol, a tangible manifestation of potential reclaimed, identity restored, and purpose realized. Over subsequent weeks, Jack's recognition expanded. Invitations arrived for speaking engagements, collaborative projects, and mentorship opportunities. The mornings, once a private space of creation and reflection, had become a platform for influence, inspiration, and community connection. Jack observed physical, cognitive, and emotional transformations, steady hands, sharper focus, heightened endurance, and a resilient mindset. The disciplined practice of mornings created not only technical mastery but holistic growth, affirming that age, past failure, and long-deferred dreams did not define potential. One morning, as Jack prepared for another workshop, he paused in the garage, reflecting on the journey. The inner war, once dominated by fear and doubt, was now structured, navigable, and productive. Incremental victories, disciplined mornings, and deliberate outreach had created a life trajectory characterized by agency, relevance, and sustained impact. He whispered to himself, "I am still capable. I am still creating. I am still here." Recognition is the reflection, not the purpose. That day, the workshop proceeded with energy, engagement, and curiosity. Older adults explored basic engineering principles, solar energy, and iterative testing. Jack emphasized that the journey mattered more than mastery, that disciplined mornings could create agency, purpose, and meaningful engagement regardless of age. Emma assisted, demonstrating the solar car and guiding participants through simple experiments. Participants were inspired, expressing intent to reclaim mornings, initiate creative projects, and re-engage with family and community. The ripple effect, Jack realized, extended beyond immediate recognition. Each morning reclaimed, each deliberate action, and each courageous sharing of personal effort influenced others, creating networks of motivation, learning, and empowerment. Over the next several weeks, Jack refined presentations, engaged in mentorship, and continued hands-on experimentation with the solar car. The recognition from the museum and community amplified motivation, yet Jack remained focused on purpose rather than accolades. He documented lessons, prepared tutorials, and reflected deeply on the intersection of discipline, creativity, and personal transformation. By evening, after meticulous refinement and thoughtful reflection, Jack felt the satisfaction of cumulative progress. The inner war had shifted yet again, fear and doubt were present, acknowledged, but tempered by confidence, skill, and deliberate action. He understood that recognition, while gratifying, was a signal of alignment with purpose rather than an endpoint. Jack whispered quietly to himself, "I am capable. I am creating. I am influencing. I am here, fully engaged." That night, as he closed the garage door and prepared for rest, he reflected on the broader journey, from hesitant mornings, deferred dreams, and quiet doubt to disciplined action, technical mastery, family reconnection, community engagement, and public recognition. Each sunrise had been an opportunity to act, create, and transform. Each deliberate morning compounded into confidence, skill, and influence. And as sleep claimed him, Jack anticipated the next dawn, the next opportunity to rise, create, share, and continue transforming fear, doubt, and potential into tangible impact, connection, and meaningful purpose. Jack woke to the faint, silver-blue light of dawn, the crisp air carrying a subtle chill that signaled early winter was approaching. The mornings had become sacred rituals, each sunrise a deliberate opportunity to act, reflect, and create. The solar car rested in the garage, panels gleaming, motor calibrated, a tangible manifestation of months of disciplined effort. Yet today, Jack sensed something different, a challenge that extended beyond mechanical precision and technical mastery, a test of courage, resilience, and the willingness to push beyond comfort. He brewed coffee, savoring the warmth and ritual, and carried it to the garage, where Emma was already sketching diagrams and annotating notes. "Grandpa," she asked, "what's different about today?" Jack smiled, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension in his expression. "Today, we test limits, ours and the car's. Not just stability or efficiency, but endurance. We see how far preparation, focus, and persistence can really take us." The inner war, the persistent negotiation with fear, doubt, and deferred dreams, had evolved over months of disciplined mornings. Fear was no longer paralyzing, it had become a guide, a signal to act deliberately, anticipate obstacles, and embrace uncertainty. Yet pushing beyond comfort required a new level of mental and emotional resilience, one that demanded both confidence and humility. Jack began by meticulously inspecting the solar car. Every screw, wire, and panel was examined, adjusted, and tested. He recalibrated the energy capture system, analyzed potential stress points, and ran simulations for extended use under varying sunlight and terrain conditions. Emma assisted, her curiosity and insight amplifying Jack's focus. Together, they rehearsed the demonstration, anticipating potential failures, and planning adjustments. By mid-morning, Jack decided to attempt a long-distance outdoor test, taking the solar car on a route that included gentle inclines, uneven pavement, and shaded areas that would challenge solar efficiency. The route represented more than a technical test, it was a symbolic confrontation with limits, physical, emotional, and psychological. Heart pounding, Jack positioned the car, checked connections, and whispered to himself, "We are ready." Fear is a signal, not a barrier. The car began its journey, moving steadily under the early sun. Initial performance was smooth, yet as it encountered shaded areas and subtle inclines, speed dropped slightly, challenging Jack's calibration and understanding. He made careful adjustments, noting each change, observing the interplay of energy absorption, motor function, and terrain interaction. Emma monitored progress, offering observations, taking notes, and providing encouragement. The solar car maintained momentum, overcoming obstacles with incremental adjustments. Jack felt exhilaration tempered by vigilance, recognizing that pushing beyond comfort required focus, patience, and adaptability. After several miles, the car completed the route successfully. Triumph surged through Jack, not merely as a technical accomplishment but as proof that deliberate action, discipline, and courage could overcome perceived limitations. Yet he understood that the challenge extended beyond mechanics, it was a reinforcement of resilience, problem-solving, and trust in process. That afternoon, Jack shared progress with Michael. They reviewed data, analyzed performance under varying conditions, and discussed potential refinements. Michael expressed admiration for both technical skill and emotional courage, recognizing the transformation in Jack's approach to fear, limits, and agency. Conversations deepened familial bonds, illustrating how disciplined mornings and deliberate action could reshape relationships as well as personal capabilities. Over the following days, Jack focused on iterative refinement. Motor efficiency was enhanced, panel alignment optimized, and chassis stability tested under incremental stress conditions. Each morning began with detailed review, hands-on adjustments, reflection, and documentation. Emma's participation continued to provide insight, energy, and perspective, reinforcing the relational dimension of the project. Jack observed subtle changes in himself. Physical endurance improved, focus sharpened, patience deepened, and emotional resilience strengthened. The inner war had transformed, fear and doubt were present but navigable, signals for careful action rather than barriers. One morning, Jack received a message from the museum organizers. A larger showcase was planned, inviting senior innovators from across the region. Jack felt a surge of both excitement and apprehension. The challenge would extend beyond familiar territory, requiring public demonstration, engagement with new audiences, and presentation under scrutiny. Yet he recognized this as another opportunity to confront fear, embrace uncertainty, and demonstrate that disciplined mornings and persistent action could scale impact. Preparation intensified. Jack refined presentations, documented processes, rehearsed explanations, and anticipated questions. Emma assisted, ensuring clarity, visual appeal, and accessibility for diverse audiences. Together, they simulated public interactions, addressing potential misunderstandings, technical queries, and challenges in communication. The mornings became both laboratory and rehearsal space, a crucible where technical skill, emotional resilience, and communicative clarity were cultivated simultaneously. When the day arrived, Jack transported the solar car to the larger venue. The room was filled with senior innovators, museum staff, and curious visitors. Nerves flickered, a familiar tug of doubt and anticipation, but Jack anchored himself in purpose, sharing, inspiring, and demonstrating the power of disciplined mornings, persistent action, and courageous engagement. He began with a narrative, explaining the journey from hesitant, idle mornings to deliberate, disciplined practice that produced technical achievement, personal growth, and relational connection. Emma assisted, displaying diagrams, data, and progress timelines. The solar car demonstration proceeded flawlessly, moving across the venue with precision and stability. Jack highlighted technical principles, iterative learning, and the importance of resilience in confronting limits. Audience engagement was profound. Visitors asked questions about methodology, problem solving, and motivation. Jack responded with humility and clarity, emphasizing that pushing beyond comfort required daily commitment, courage to confront fear, and iterative practice. Recognition was immediate and meaningful. Several visitors expressed intent to reclaim mornings, pursue delayed projects, or engage with family and community. Jack realized that challenging comfort zones was not only personal growth but a catalyst for inspiration, connection, and influence. Over subsequent mornings, Jack and Emma refined documentation, shared tutorials, and prepared follow-up workshops. The ripple effect of disciplined action, courage, and public engagement extended through family, community, and online networks. Physical, cognitive, and emotional growth were evident: steadier hands, sharper focus, heightened resilience, and a renewed sense of agency. Jack reflected on the evolving inner war. Fear, once dominating, was now a guide. Doubt prompted reflection rather than paralysis. Resilience was strengthened through incremental challenge. Recognition, while gratifying, was secondary to growth, agency, and relational connection. Each morning represented opportunity to act deliberately, confront limits, nurture skill, and extend influence. One morning, after a particularly rigorous test, Jack paused in the garage, observing the solar car gliding smoothly across uneven pavement. The sunlight glinted off panels, the hum of the motor a quiet affirmation of effort, focus, and disciplined practice. He whispered to himself, "Comfort is a boundary, not a destination." Courage and persistence expanded. That day, Jack prepared a video documenting lessons from pushing beyond comfort, strategies for iterative improvement, confronting fear, engaging relational support, and embracing uncertainty. The video was shared online and with museum networks, prompting responses from older adults inspired to test personal limits, undertake long-delayed projects, and reclaim mornings with purpose. The ripple effect amplified, extending Jack's influence and reinforcing the transformative potential of disciplined mornings. Over the following weeks, Jack balanced technical refinement, public engagement, and personal reflection. Each sunrise began with review, planning, and execution. Each day culminated in reflection, documentation, and anticipation for further growth. Emma and Michael's involvement reinforced intergenerational collaboration, mentorship, and relational connection. Jack observed that the mornings, once private and isolated, had become a framework for sustained transformation, technical mastery, emotional resilience, relational depth, and community impact. One evening, as the sun set over the driveway, Jack closed the garage door and reflected on the broader journey. From hesitant beginnings to disciplined practice, from fear and doubt to skill, resilience, and recognition, the path had been iterative, relational, and transformative. The inner war had shifted into a navigable framework for continuous growth. Jack whispered quietly, "I am capable. I am creating. I am pushing boundaries. I am here, fully engaged." Sleep came with the quiet satisfaction of accomplishment, anticipation, and agency. Jack understood that mornings reclaimed, challenges confronted, and limits tested were not merely technical exercises but the foundation of meaningful, sustained transformation. Each sunrise promised the continuation of growth, connection, and influence, a life reclaimed, purpose restored, and courage affirmed. Jack woke to a pale gold light spilling over the horizon, the air sharp with the crisp bite of late winter mornings. His body felt the familiar stiffness that accompanied age, but mornings like these had become sacred rituals, moments of creation, reflection, and deliberate action that shaped not only his day but his sense of purpose. The solar car sat in the garage, panels gleaming faintly in the morning light, a testament to months of meticulous refinement, disciplined mornings, and courageous confrontation with both technical and personal limits. Today, Jack sensed that something profound was on the verge of unfolding, a breakthrough moment, both for the car and for himself. He brewed coffee, inhaling the warmth as he considered the day ahead, and carried it to the garage. Emma was already there, eyes bright, notebook open, markers in hand. "Grandpa," she asked, "do you feel it too? Today feels different." Jack smiled, a mixture of anticipation and quiet exhilaration. "Yes, Emma. Today we see how far the work, the mornings, and our persistence can really take us." The breakthrough, Jack realized, would not come from a single action or discovery, but from the cumulative effect of disciplined effort, reflection, and incremental improvement. It was the product of countless mornings reclaimed from doubt, fear, and inertia. He began the day with detailed inspection of the solar car, checking every connection, motor alignment, and panel angle. Each adjustment was deliberate, measured, and informed by the iterative learning that had shaped his mornings. Emma assisted, asking questions that prompted deeper reflection on principles, design choices, and the broader purpose behind their work. By mid-morning, Jack was ready for a full-scale endurance test. The route extended several miles beyond the usual driveway and local streets, incorporating inclines, uneven pavement, shaded areas, and varied sunlight exposure. It was a comprehensive trial designed to test energy capture, motor efficiency, and chassis stability under realistic conditions. As he positioned the solar car at the starting point, Jack felt a familiar flutter of nerves, anticipation mingled with the echoes of doubt, but he anchored himself in purpose, recalling Elon Musk's philosophy of action, risk, and relentless pursuit of meaningful goals. Emma held the control pad, her small hands steady. "Ready, Grandpa?" she asked. Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. "Ready." The car began its journey, moving steadily under the pale morning sun. Initial motion was smooth, and Jack watched with careful attention as it traversed the first incline. The motor hummed consistently, panels adjusted to varying light conditions, and performance metrics displayed steady efficiency. As the car encountered shaded areas, Jack monitored energy consumption, making subtle adjustments to maintain balance and momentum. With each mile, the solar car performed reliably, surpassing previous distances and demonstrating consistent energy efficiency. Triumph surged through Jack, tempered by focus and anticipation. This moment was not merely technical, it symbolized the culmination of disciplined mornings, persistent effort, and courage to confront limits. Emma clapped quietly, her eyes sparkling. "Grandpa, it's amazing. Look at it go." Jack felt a swell of pride, but also humility. The breakthrough was not just in performance but in realization. Disciplined action, consistency, and courage could overcome both technical and personal barriers, even in later life. Returning home after the successful test, Jack reviewed data meticulously. Motor performance, energy efficiency, and panel calibration exceeded previous benchmarks. He documented each observation, prepared visual representations, and reflected on the cumulative lessons. The breakthrough moment extended beyond mechanical achievement, it was an affirmation of personal growth, resilience, and capacity for meaningful contribution. That evening, Jack shared progress with Michael. Together, they analyzed data, discussed potential improvements, and reflected on the significance of sustained effort and deliberate mornings. Michael expressed admiration not just for technical skill but for the courage, patience, and persistence demonstrated over months of disciplined practice. Conversations deepened familial bonds, highlighting the transformative power of shared purpose and intergenerational collaboration. Over the following week, Jack focused on enhancing documentation, creating a structured tutorial for others interested in solar energy, engineering principles, and iterative learning. He emphasized process over outcome, courage over certainty, and discipline over speed. Emma assisted in editing visuals, diagrams, and notes, ensuring clarity, accessibility, and engagement. Each morning began with meticulous review, hands-on adjustments, and reflective practice. Each evening concluded with documentation, assessment, and planning for subsequent challenges. The breakthrough moment reverberated beyond the garage. Responses from the museum, online networks, and local community demonstrated the power of visible, disciplined action. Older adults expressed interest in reclaiming mornings, pursuing delayed projects, and engaging in creative endeavors. Jack realized that personal breakthroughs catalyzed collective inspiration, extending the ripple effect of disciplined mornings, courage, and deliberate effort. One morning, as Jack prepared for another test, he paused and reflected on the journey. The solar car glided flawlessly across uneven pavement, sunlight glinting off panels, the hum of the motor a quiet affirmation of effort, focus, and persistence. He whispered to himself, breakthroughs are not sudden, they are the sum of disciplined mornings, courage, and relentless pursuit of purpose. That day, Jack filmed a video documenting lessons learned from the breakthrough, iterative improvement, resilience, confronting fear, and embracing incremental progress. Emma assisted in filming, editing, and adding visual aids. The video was shared online, garnering responses from older adults, educators, and community members inspired to reclaim mornings, pursue long-deferred projects, and embrace courage in action. Over the next several weeks, Jack balanced technical refinement, community engagement, and personal reflection. Each sunrise began with review, planning, and execution. Each day ended with reflection, documentation, and anticipation of further growth. Physical endurance, focus, patience, and emotional resilience continued to improve. The mornings, once private, had become a framework for sustained transformation, intergenerational collaboration, and community influence. Recognition from broader networks, museum showcases, online engagement, and community acknowledgement reinforced but did not define purpose. Jack understood that breakthrough moments were both culmination and catalyst, affirmation of disciplined action and motivation for continued growth. One evening, Jack closed the garage door after a day of experimentation and reflection. The solar car rested silently, panels glinting faintly under fading light. The breakthrough moment, he realized, was not merely in measurable achievement but in transformation, skill, identity, resilience, and relational connection had expanded through disciplined mornings and courageous engagement. He whispered to himself, I am capable. I am creating. I am breaking through. Each morning matters. Each action matters. Sleep claimed him with a profound sense of accomplishment and anticipation. He understood that breakthroughs were iterative, relational, and cumulative. Each morning reclaimed, each deliberate action, and each courageous confrontation with limits reinforced personal growth, influence, and purpose. And as dawn approached again, Jack anticipated the next sunrise, ready to rise, act, create, and continue the journey of transformation, confident that disciplined mornings, persistence, and courage could continue to ripple outward, shaping both his life and the lives of others in meaningful, enduring ways. Jack woke to the first light of a pale spring morning, the air cool and fragrant with the faint scent of blossoming trees. The mornings had become more than a schedule, they were sacred, deliberate rituals that shaped not only his day but his sense of purpose and identity. The solar car gleamed under the garage lights, panels catching the early sun, a symbol of months of disciplined effort, courage, and persistent experimentation. Today, Jack sensed that the ripple effect of his work, the quiet transformation that began in the garage and had grown outward, would expand in unexpected ways. He brewed coffee, savoring the warmth as he contemplated the day, and carried it to the garage. Emma was already there, sketching diagrams, annotating notes, and full of anticipation. "Grandpa," she said, eyes shining, "look. There are messages from people across the country. They're sharing your videos, and some are starting their own projects." Jack felt a surge of awe and gratitude. The mornings, once private and solitary, had become catalysts for connection, creativity, and inspiration far beyond his immediate family. The ripple effect, incremental actions leading to collective transformation, was tangible. "That's incredible, Emma," he said, smiling. "It shows what consistent action and courage can do." Jack began the morning by refining the solar car further, checking motor alignment, calibrating panels, and ensuring energy efficiency. Each adjustment was deliberate, informed by iterative learning and reflective practice. Emma assisted, her observations prompting him to articulate principles and lessons that could inspire others. Together, they filmed a tutorial segment aimed at older adults who wanted to start small, creative projects, emphasizing process, courage, and disciplined mornings over technical perfection. After preparing the video, Jack scheduled a virtual workshop with senior centers across several states. Participants would join online to watch, learn, and share their experiences. Jack felt a familiar flutter of nerves. Presenting to a broader audience carried risk, but he reminded himself that growth and influence required exposure, deliberate action, and the courage to embrace uncertainty. The virtual session began mid-morning. Older adults from diverse backgrounds joined, curious, eager, and in some cases hesitant. Jack introduced the solar car, sharing the journey from hesitant mornings to disciplined practice, the iterative refinement process, and the emotional evolution that accompanied it. Emma assisted, managing visuals, diagrams, and live demonstration of the solar car's capabilities. Questions flowed steadily. Participants asked about solar energy, iterative experimentation, and personal motivation. Jack responded with clarity, humility, and encouragement, emphasizing that age was never a barrier to creativity, learning, or purpose. "You don't need to start with perfect knowledge," he said. "You need to start with courage, curiosity, and consistent effort. The mornings you reclaim are yours to shape." One participant, a retired teacher named Martha, shared her hesitation to start a long-delayed art project. Jack listened attentively, offering guidance on structuring time, embracing experimentation, and cultivating patience. "It's never too late to begin," he said. "Each morning is a new opportunity to create, learn, and influence." The session continued with practical demonstrations, audience engagement, and open discussion. Jack noted the energy in the virtual room, curiosity, hope, and recognition that transformation was possible. The ripple effect was evident. One action inspiring many, one morning reclaimed sparking collective engagement. Following the session, Jack reviewed feedback. Comments highlighted inspiration, renewed motivation, and intentions to start personal projects. Messages arrived from participants who had begun small experiments with solar energy, engineering, or creative work. The ripple effect was expanding, fueled by shared experience, structured guidance, and authentic demonstration of persistence and courage. Over the next week, Jack focused on documenting the ripple effect, creating a visual map of participant engagement, projects initiated, and personal reflections. Emma assisted, organizing data, designing infographics, and noting qualitative stories of transformation. Jack realized that the ripple effect extended beyond technical projects. It influenced identity, agency, confidence, and relational connection. One morning, a message arrived from a local school interested in integrating solar energy projects for intergenerational learning. Jack and Emma prepared materials, combining technical instruction with personal storytelling, emphasizing discipline, curiosity, and resilience. The workshop included older adults paired with students, fostering dialogue, mentorship, and collaborative creation. Jack observed the dynamic with satisfaction. Mornings reclaimed, action taken, and courage demonstrated had sparked a network of learning, connection, and meaningful engagement. Physical, cognitive, and emotional transformations were evident. Jack's focus sharpened, endurance improved, and patience deepened. The inner war, fear, doubt, and deferred dreams, was now a navigable framework, guiding deliberate action and fostering growth. Emma's presence reinforced intergenerational collaboration, creativity, and relational depth. Over the following weeks, Jack expanded outreach, participating in local community demonstrations, online webinars, and collaborative projects with schools and senior centers. Each morning began with reflection, planning, and hands-on action, and concluded with assessment, documentation, and anticipation for further ripple effects. Jack realized that influence was not the result of a single action but the accumulation of disciplined mornings, courageous engagement, and deliberate sharing. One morning, Jack walked through the garage, observing the solar car gliding smoothly across uneven pavement. The sunlight reflected off the panels, the hum of the motor a quiet affirmation of effort, learning, and impact. He whispered, "Ripple effects are the echoes of deliberate action. Each morning, each choice, each effort matters." That day, Jack prepared a comprehensive tutorial for broader distribution, technical principles, iterative learning, and personal reflections on courage, discipline, and resilience. Emma assisted, ensuring accessibility, clarity, and engagement. The tutorial was shared with online communities, senior centers, and educational networks, prompting responses from older adults inspired to reclaim mornings, initiate projects, and embrace curiosity and agency. Over subsequent mornings, Jack refined techniques, expanded documentation, and continued mentorship. Recognition, though gratifying, remained secondary to purpose, guiding others, modeling persistent action, and demonstrating that transformation is iterative, relational, and grounded in disciplined practice. The ripple effect grew. Older adults reported personal projects, renewed engagement with family, and deeper self-confidence. Jack realized that mornings reclaimed were not just technical exercises, they were instruments of transformation, shaping identity, agency, and relational networks. One afternoon, Jack received a message from a participant named Harold, who had begun building a small solar-powered device at home. Harold wrote about feeling renewed purpose, excitement, and connection with his grandchildren through the project. Jack responded thoughtfully, offering guidance and encouragement. The moment reinforced the profound truth: ripple effects extend far beyond immediate action, influencing emotional resilience, relational depth, and intergenerational connection. Over the next several weeks, Jack balanced technical refinement, mentorship, and personal reflection. Each sunrise began with review, planning, and execution. Each day concluded with reflection, documentation, and anticipation for further impact. Emma's involvement reinforced the collaborative, intergenerational nature of growth and influence. Physical, cognitive, and emotional development continued steadily: steadier hands, sharper focus, increased endurance, and a heightened sense of purpose. Jack recognized that ripple effects were iterative, relational, and cumulative. Each morning reclaimed, each deliberate action, and each shared experience contributed to networks of transformation, inspiration, and influence. The solar car, once a personal project, had become a symbol of disciplined mornings, courage, and the capacity to expand impact beyond oneself. One evening, Jack closed the garage door after a day of experimentation, mentorship, and documentation. He stood for a moment, watching the fading light, reflecting on the journey from private mornings to collective transformation. The ripple effect had extended from the garage to homes, schools, community centers, and online networks. He whispered quietly, "One morning can spark many. One action can ripple far. Each of us has the power to create, connect, and inspire." Sleep came with a profound sense of fulfillment and anticipation. Jack understood that the ripple effect was ongoing, fueled by disciplined mornings, courageous action, and deliberate sharing. Each sunrise represented opportunity to act, create, connect, and expand influence. Each morning reclaimed was a seed for transformation, each deliberate choice a catalyst for broader impact. And as dawn approached again, Jack anticipated the next sunrise, ready to continue the journey, confident that disciplined mornings, courage, and persistent action could ripple outward, shaping not only his life but the lives of countless others in meaningful, enduring ways. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?